mentioned capitalism again and thinking about the profit and stuff. Is that something you think a lot about? Like, do you feel, it seems like you're a little jaded by capitalism.
Maybe just a little bit. I think about it a lot, and it's something that, especially because I had some extra room this year to take environmental classes,
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about it because it seems to be at the heart of a lot of
Mm.
issues. So, one, there's a couple things.
Okay.
First, we talked about something called a degrowth economy. So, capitalism is built on the idea of that we always need to grow and like always need to be getting a higher GDP. Resources are scarce, so we need to make sure that we have a way to like create competition
Yeah.
and that sort of stuff. I didn't explain it great, but growth.
No, I'm with you.
And there are people out there who are arguing for what's known as a degrowth economy. So rather than focusing on growth, they're like, hey, resources actually aren't scarce. We have enough resources in the world to feed everybody. So a common thing that a lot of people talk about is like food waste, where especially in the US, our food waste, whether that's from supermarkets or our own individual food waste or the farms that grow it, if we didn't waste it and we distributed it more equally, we'd have enough to feed everybody on the planet. But because things are privatized and the way that like the resources are distributed, they do seem scarce to some people. But instead of viewing the world that way, like these degrowth people are like, hey, let's actually redistribute resources and let's not focus on growth, but let's focus on the fact that there are enough resources and how we can support people so that everybody can have access to them and live a good life still. And good life, is still a little bit
Yeah. Sure.
subjective terminology, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna push back against some of that stuff though, because I don't. They're not. Those two things don't have to be separate. It's not. Let's not focus on growth and focus on this instead. I don't think there. It has to be instead, because ultimately that's what people do is grow. I mean, we as a human race, we will not stop innovating and getting bigger and better and constantly growing our society until we go to Mars and then go further and further and start expanding and expanding. That's just what humanity does and have always, that's what we've always done. And just looking at the jump in complexity of just person, of human being life, the complexity of life from decade to decade is exponentially growing in so many different ways. And so I don't think that the answer is to stop growing. I kind of think that's why would we stop growing? Do you think that we've kind of peaked? Like, is this, as should we stop growing? What do you mean by growing? Maybe that's where I'm getting pushback from.
yeah, that's actually a really good question. And I definitely should clarify that because growing is not a bad thing. Like everything you pointed out, cool,
Yes. Okay.
good.
All right.
But it's specifically focusing on economic growth. So thinking that we constantly have to like as a country make our GDP higher.
Okay.
And they're arguing like we don't need to be so for a lot of let me step back and like use
Yeah.
an example because
I'm
maybe
with you.
that'd be clear.
Sure.
So for say you're a business and
Hmm.
everything you're worried about is about making profit a lot of times.
Okay.
Not all businesses, but say you're a really big one and
Probably
everything on
most
the
of them. I mean, probably
yeah.
most businesses want to make a profit. Yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
if not all.
and a lot of these businesses, especially for the people who are at the top of them,
Yeah.
it's all about making the profit as big as it possibly can be. So when I say growth, it's like growing specifically that profit, but in the way our economy is structured, it grows the profit for the people at the top. And then they're like, hey, trickle down economics. It will like trickle down and y'all will be good too because we get more money. But it turns out that doesn't really work.
Mm.
very well. As we saw in the pandemic, actually, there's a lot of, at least I've seen a lot of stuff in the environmental sphere where they talk about these huge corporations like Amazon and Walmart and, Jeff Bezos, which I know you've read his book.
I
And
have.
so I haven't read his book and I
The
don't know a lot
Everything
about him,
Store. Yeah,
but
the Everything Store. A quick aside from that. Oh yeah, I got it. Okay, I forgot the title, but one of my favorite things I learned from that book, which is just a fun fact, it's does not relate to what we're talking at all. But if you go to www.relentless.com, it will take you to amazon.com because that was the company's original name was Relentless. And people were like, "Yo, Jeff, I think that might be a little intense for people." Because it was a bookstore and it was called relentless.com. And but they still own that domain. And so if you go to relentless.com, it will take you to Amazon. And so that's just a nice,
hmm,
like, this is what the company is and stands for, and this is the approach. But Amazon's pretty awesome at the same time. So I don't know if I'm super upset about that approach to things, because we benefit pretty greatly from it and in a lot of different ways, I think. But they've also struggled a lot with worker rights and those kinds of things, and I don't know, workplace quality, that kind of thing for their employees. So I see that too. But if businesses aren't focused on profit, do you think that they would be we would have the same benefits that we have from them with Walmart or Amazon or Apple or whatever, the big, I mean, if businesses aren't focused on profitizing what they're doing, what is the incentive for these businesses to be to be relentless?
I mean, do they need to be relentless? I guess would be my question.
I think that I don't know if Amazon would be what it is today if they weren't. I don't know. I guess it again comes to the language, which is gonna gonna be a huge barrier for just humanity for forever. Is because, like, what does relentless mean? Does it necessarily mean to be cutthroat? I'm gonna destroy my competition at whatever cost. I don't care about my employees because they're just under me and that they're gonna work until they run into the ground, and then I get what I want from that. Is that relentless, or is relentless? I'm gonna work as hard as I can to provide a product that is necessary and wanted in the public, and therefore I will make a profit on that, which I will then be able to do blank blank whatever I want in this world with. And so I don't know. I I guess it's both in some ways. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you talk to, because when I think of relentless, I think of somebody who's going to do whatever it takes to make the most money possible, at
Hmm.
least in business terms.
All right.
So when it comes to Amazon and things like that, I guess it's not bad to focus on profit, because obviously you need to make a profit to make a living and pay
Okay.
your employees and stuff like that. But I think they need to factor in other things other than just profit. So not like put profit up here and put everything else way down below it, but factoring in things like what are the costs we're creating because we're so focused on profit. So I think this is actually the reading I just did for one of my classes. They were talking
Perfect.
about um, cost benefit analysis. That's usually what, businesses talk about everything having a price on it.
Hmm.
And if you're talking about environment stuff or the costs that these their like bad practices as a business creates for the environment and for people, a lot of times that's not factored into like the business model. So they don't really think about it and they don't really care. So some people argue, well, let's just put a price on like natural resources. And if they see how much nature is worth as a resource, then we can factor that into our analysis and like not destroy it as much. So I'm not saying that's like a great model, because yeah, I don't really like the idea of putting a price on nature, because I don't really think you can, because we just wouldn't exist without it.
Hmm.
But I just think they need to refocus on, as businesses, how do we keep making a profit, but restructure our business to also care about making a good place for our employees to work and keeping them there, not creating extreme consequences to the environment around us, whether that's through greenhouse gas emissions, whether that's through um, dominance, especially when it comes to the Western world, like trying to expand to all of the other countries and kind of take over a history of imperialism and colonialism, basically.
Hmm.
And how can we focus more on the going back to near the beginning of our conversation, how do we focus on flourishing and use businesses to support flourishing rather than only focusing on profits that the top executives mostly see?